Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about as a backdrop at least, Elon Musk's email, or the Doge email, to federal government employees in the United States. And they're asked, what did you do last week? I think is the text of the email that was sent to workers. What do you do? List the five things or most important things you did last week. So, and send your email to wherever it was. So now this seems to have stirred up a surprising amount of outrage, righteous indignation type outrage as well. How dare you ask me, you Nazi motherfuckers? So let's just have a look at the wider issue here of being asked to be accountable. What did you do? You're drawing a salary, you come into the office, you sit at a desk or work remote or whatever it is, but you're supposed to be doing some sort of work, surely, producing something. So what did you do? Now, this has again sent the whole, or many people in it, into this huge tailspin. So why is that so? Now, I've had to do many, gazillion employee evaluations, over my time and working in the private sector, and also from time to time, companies hire consultants that invariably come up with these, and we'll just find out what people are doing. If you don't know what people do, ask them, what is it you do and what did you do? What have you accomplished? What have you achieved? Some of it's rather cynical and silly, I think. And quite pointless in a private company, particularly if they're in a competitive sector of the market. There isn't a whole lot of fat to cut. You can have a misapplication of resources. That's possible. People, regional managers creating fiefdoms, and this, you can have that. But generally, there's not a whole lot of way in a competitive market sector. Also, companies that fall into the trap of cronyism and seeking personal loyalty rather than competence, again, you can have problems there. But overall, the problem with people, people being hired and they don't actually have a job to do and may never have had a job to do. And this is typically in areas where their government, the bureaucracy, of course, which is what Elon Musk is looking at, or monopolies, oligopolies, where they don't have competitive market forces to deal with government quangos, or NGOs that have just rivers of money being disgorged into them by US aid or other such groups. And again, they don't have competitive, got to do a job, got to meet the deadline type pressures. Now, in the case of the public service, it's invariably used for political purposes, and very few politicians can resist that temptation, particularly politicians of the left and their cherished so-called social programs, where they say, well, look, there's, women and minorities are underrepresented, so what we'll do is we'll just create millions of unneeded jobs and in the public service, and we'll just employ minority groups, whether it be blacks or black women or brown women, and we'll just employ them there. Whether they have actual work to do or there's a purpose to it, doesn't matter. We're going off the other side of the ledger here, which is hiring based on quotas, race, gender, and all this sort of thing. Now, I've had, and still do, have relatives working in public service jobs, and they are staggered at the effect of race and gender and disability quotas. So a job came up or a position became vacant as a senior supervisor for a particular section or area of the bureaucracy, but the policy is that you have to have a certain amount of wheelchair-bound people in supervisory roles, and they were one short in their quota for this, and so it was decided the job had to go to a person in a wheelchair. Now, the trouble is the job involves quite a lot of moving around and running around and doing this and doing that and attending off-site meetings and so on. It's supposed to, but they put the person in the job who was in I think they were a quadriplegic in this particular role, and they couldn't do any of the things. So they were given the job based on a quota requirement. So if they had to fill out the thing, what did you do? Well, I didn't do anything. I'm just filling a quota position. That's all I'm doing. So someone like that couldn't answer that email from Elon Musk, assuming they're in that position now. But there's a whole lot of screaming going, well, hold on a minute, that person is brown, they're female, and they're a quadriplegic, and you're asking them, what have they done? I mean, you heartless, cruel, fascist Nazi Hitler. But the reality is they were put in that position to do a job that they can't do, could never do, couldn't even come close to doing. So is the fault lying with the person? Well, what do you put them in that job for? Get them out of it and put someone in who can do the job, which is the reasonable thing. Or do you say, well, that's actually not really a job. It's just welfare for a disability person, and to give them a sense of prestige in pretending that they're doing something when really they're not. Now, the list goes on once you look at the public service. For example, there's one government area, one government department has a policy where they take handicapped people to sporting events to participate in sporting. So you get blind lesbian footballers and blind lesbian karate people, and so on. And so, it's insane, I know, but in order to do that, they have to have people who, especially certified people to handle, help the disabled person get into the bus. Then they have special bus drivers that are disabled, qualified and certified and so on. But those people aren't needed all the time, but they could be needed at any time. So you've got this whole pool of buses and people there on standby just in case the disabled person, the blind person, wants to go and play football. So they have to be there because we have to have equal outcomes. The blind person has to have an equal social outcome to the seeing person. As insane as that is, that's the ideological insanity. So you have these people sitting around doing nothing, just waiting in case the blind person wants to go somewhere or do something. So if they had to fill out the forms, fill out the email and saying, what did you do? Well, I sat around for the whole week in case the handicapped person wanted to go here or there. And you go, what? You did what? I mean, you employ someone to sit around and do nothing just in case, or maybe they might be, and this sort of thing. So now there are many, many jobs in the bureaucracy, the federal and state level bureaucracy that are like that. So they're standby in case they're needed, or they're handicapped allocation jobs and so on. Now, how many of those jobs exist, I don't know, but there's a lot. Now, the same goes for any private business or ostensibly private business, which is a monopoly, or they've got an exclusive government contract that goes forever. Now, there's a company we recently did some work for, and if you can't, it's hard to find, other than a bureaucracy, it's hard to find that many unqualified people, lazy people who do nothing, and people who are just pretending. It's like children playing house. It's insane. And and so we go along. This is at the the beginning, and along come all these people into the meeting. And what do these people do? There are a lot of brown women at this place, black and brown women. And they come into the meeting. What do they do? What are their what's their role? Do they even know? And they appear not to know, and then no one else seems to know. So the senior, the more senior manager in the room, who was himself a gay Asian, so he's minority. I was asking, well, all these people came to the meeting. Are they involved in the thing? Oh no, they just wanted to come so they can keep abreast of what's. What you mean they have nothing to do with it? No involvement at all, yet they can just wander in looking all sleepy and dreamy and spend a couple of hours just sitting there. I mean, is this for real? So the amount of, so if they had to fill out the what do you do, And this guy admitted that these people actually don't really do anything, and all they do is pretend that they're doing something by attending meetings all day. So they shuffle from meeting room to meeting room, these brown women, and with no job, no responsibility. They're not tasked with anything. They've got nothing to do. But that's all they do, is just wander around into meetings. Maybe they only attend one meeting a day, and the rest of the time they're going to the very well provisioned restaurant, and they had a really good coffee making facility there, by the way, all different flavors and so on. Some of the best coffee I've tasted, actually. So very well provisioned place, but no one actually seemed to do any work. No one seemed to be responsible for anything. No one seemed to know what they were doing, even if they were supposed to be responsible. So here's another example of that people had to fill out a thing saying this is what I did. That very few probably could, and therefore many could be let go. So they become now the government in return. So the government extends the bureaucratic ideological sort of reach. So they reach into these companies and say, look, we'll give you the 25-year contract. We'll let you screw the taxpayer over for whatever. We don't care. But you've got to employ a lot of brown lesbians or black lesbians. That's the condition. That is the requirement. So we want to see lots of minorities. We don't want to see straight white men in these jobs. We want to see minorities. And in return, you'll just have an endless contract. And no matter how useless or incompetent or hopeless you are, it doesn't matter. Now, there's another organisation we did some work for that had some sort of an oversight of an aspect of government functioning. And they too have an exclusive contract. Now, we actually did business with them some years ago when they were kind of private, or more private than that. They didn't have an exclusive government contract. They had to bid for it. So it was all white guys, all hardworking, conscientious, they earned it type white guys. But as soon as they got the government contract, bang, that was it. The white guys were gone. And because they've got guaranteed revenues and income. So it's really a USAID funding model that the government's using all around the world, certainly the Western world anyway, where they offer exclusive contracts, no questions asked, charge the highest price, it's okay with us. But in return, they want that ideological reach into the business. So really, we're looking at a situation across what hitherto was the private sector, certainly the NGO sector, the little we've had to do with NGOs. We're staggered at just how much fat they're carrying. And as I've mentioned many, many times before, the best paid jobs in Australia now are NGO jobs. They're not jobs working in the private sector. Doing a job whistling up a placard waving crowd of university kids pays better than 90% of the private sector managerial jobs these days. You're running you're the factory manager producing value add widgets. You're paid less than the guy who again whistles up scares up the placard waving university kid protest crowd. That's how insane and crazy things have got. Now, when you look at when Elon Musk took over Twitter, and Twitter was obviously loaded with fat upon fat upon fat, and the Twitter employees that did their little online videos of I sort of wandered in and turned up, and I had a healthy lunch. I attended a meeting, then I had to de-stress, and they're invariably young women. Now the point is that the leftist media have made this abundantly clear. The point is that the most of the people who don't do anything have been hired for diversity and quota and affirmative action reasons. They don't do anything. They probably can't do anything. They're not qualified to do anything or able to do anything. And on top of that, they're entitled and lazy. So they will be disproportionately affected by any cuts. And certainly any organisation, be it public service or be it private or semi-private, nearly all the do-nothing jobs are brown people, black people, and women. So there's very few jobs. Nearly all the jobs created over the last, I would say 20 years have been disproportionately employing incompetent, lazy, useless minorities. So they will, in turn, disproportionately feel the effects of any US aid cuts, any accountability, any cleaning up of corruption, and any just to sheer productivity. Now, on the issue of say, being accountable, it could be your work performance evaluation or something like Musk is doing. What did you do last week? So now having had to do, and this is with managerial staff, but even less than that. When I first became a supervisor or a manager, having to do evaluations. I never liked being. I mean, if you got on well with your boss, fine. But if you didn't, they would use the evaluation as an opportunity to stick it up you and threaten you and bully you and browbeat you. So there was always that, and that's just a reality of the human interaction. So you'd have to sort of prepare the ground by doing some major sucking up in the weeks leading up to the annual review. But just generically, what I found was that the people who were most productive and the hardest working and so on were the least likely to be concerned about their evaluation, their work performance evaluation. They were clearly doing things and being productive. Now, it's a little bit different when you're, say, a supervisor of. I mean, the first time I got promoted to where I had a lot of people to supervise, you're spending all your time supervising. You're not physically doing things. You're not, laying the bricks on top of one another because you're supervising others to do it. So when someone says, "Well, what did you do last week, Billy Bob?" Well, I supervised the people and the assistant managers and this sort of thing. Oh yeah, but Billy Bob, what did you do? Well, that's my job. Here's my job description, to supervise. Yeah, Billy Bob, but what did you do? Well, I did what the fuck I'm supposed to do in the fucking job description. Oh, right. So there's a difference between what sort of work it is, supervisory work, for example, or is it work where you build the wall by putting the bricks on, or you unload the truck, or you physically do work rather than supervisory work. So there is that differential that needs to be recognised. But for anybody that isn't in a supervisory, what did you last week? Well, I crunched out 10 spreadsheets, or I sent 100 emails, or I responded to 1,000 customer complaints, or I did this, or I attended 100 meetings, or and so on. So you did something, but I found the most productive people didn't care about the evaluation. They were fine with it. They worked hard. They did stuff. They could point to it, and getting it in its simplest thing of say, well, I mowed 100 lawns last week. Fine, done. That's it. That's what you did. But for people who didn't do anything, or did hardly anything, and there were, I'm just thinking there was a woman, a youngish woman, who was really hot, by the way, and she was in this company. She was she was called administrative support, and which means she effectively did typing and word processing and that sort of stuff. But I suppose rather duplicitously, she just wouldn't do the work that the guys in her. There was maybe 20 guys, and she's supposed to do the admin work for them. She'd managed to be so ineffective and incompetent that they didn't go to her anymore because she was just too unreliable. They had deadlines to meet, stuff to get out the door, and widgets to do, this sort of thing. But because she was so lazy and unreliable, which she purposefully concocted, that means she never had to do anything. So and I remember asking, she didn't report directly to me. But I remember asking, well, what do you do? And she just shrugged and go, oh, I just sort of type letters when I'm asked to. And she was quite unrepentant of, well, I actually don't do anything, but who cares? I walk around, in sexy outfits, and I just walk up and down and pretend I'm busy, and that's what my job is. So, you don't expect me to do work, do you? And so there's a sense of entitlement with these people. No, I don't think she could do any work. I doubt she could type at more than 20 words a minute, if that. And she was just stupid and lazy to boot. So I don't think she could do anything. So she got rather rattled when she was being asked, well, what do you do? She seemed to think it was some huge affront. And this is generally what happens. And in certainly with an organisation I went into which had a serious problem with patronage and nepotism and that sort of thing, that people were being appointed just because they were related or were the high school friends of or college friends of the CEO. So nobody was actually doing any work. I mean, if they felt like it, they might, but that was about as far as it went. And so when I started doing the employee evaluations, they'd had a system of evaluations previously where they all evaluated each other. So they all made their, well, you say nice things about me, I'll say nice things about you. And that was the evaluation process. And of course, things went south pretty quickly once they had that evaluation process. They hadn't had a sort of an EVP for some time, and the last EVP wanted to do evaluations. So the buddies of the CEO convinced the CEO to get rid of him. Anyway, after a gap of some time, I was the next EVP coming in, and so I reinstituted the evaluations, and there was endless panic from left to right and top to bottom as people would come along and say, well, look, I've got no problem with evaluate, but evaluate the other guy. Don't do me. I'm somehow outside of the evaluation paradigm. But the bottom line was these people weren't doing anything. They weren't doing anything. They weren't producing anything. And if they got Elon Musk's email, they'd have been hard pressed to put anything on it, because all they did was play socialite and people wandering in at 10 o'clock and doing nothing but organising their social calendar for lunch and coming back after lunch drunk and this sort of thing. And so these people naturally didn't like the idea, but they would play, which is what's happening in the US at the moment, they would play sort of preemptive strike games. And this is the women in particular. The men not so much, some men, but the men not so much. But the minorities, there was a few minority people in there, and the women, all of whom were hired for the wrong reasons. They would all come in, and I think almost to a person, I don't think it was an exception, they would all come in and say, oh, well, you hate me. You hate me, and that's why you're going to do a bad evaluation. You're going to give me a bad because you hate me and because you're a misogynist and so they would start hurling insults. They would create this false dichotomy of there was some sort of enmity between us and aggro, and that was going to but the idea of being accountable terrified them, absolutely terrified them, and they thought accountability was equivalent to you hate me. That it was the same thing. There was no difference in their mind. So in the I said, no, I don't hate you, and you're going to be evaluated. Okay, the bottom line, Billie Jean, is you're not doing anything. Now, I took a broader view, realizing that these people were friends and relatives of the CEO and members of the board of directors. So I had to tread somewhat carefully here. So I said, look, okay, you're doing nothing. Let's just accept that. Let's accept that you've only been hired into this job, not because you've got credentials or anything like that, just because Jimmy Jack, the CEO. That's the only reason you've got the job here. Let's be clear about that. So I'm going to give you a chance here. You've got 3 months before the next evaluation to show that you're actually doing the work. You've come to grips with it. You're being productive. I don't want you wandering in at 10 o'clock. And wandering out for long boozy lunches. I don't want you, going out, leaving at 4:30 in the afternoon because you've got some important party to go to. No, that's gone. You're employed here to do a job, and if you do the job well, you'll have no problem from me. Now remember, they're already there. They're already in the office. You might as well try and turn them into productive employees rather than have to clear out shitloads of people and then employ others. They were ostensibly in jobs where there was work to be done. They just weren't doing it, or were doing it badly, or were doing so little of it they might as well not have been there. So it's better to try and turn them around, if at all possible. In some cases, it wasn't, by the way. So that was the path that I went down there. But the same thing, the same noises that you're hearing. Oh, it's an outrage. I'm infuriated that Elon Musk. The bottom line is, if you're that upset by it, you're either so entitled that you might as well not be bothering going to work, given that level of entitlement, or you're not doing anything, or the work you're doing is so discreet and subtle that no one can detect it happening anyway. Whatever it might be. But this is the thing that Elon Musk's dealing with. Now, if you look at, say, Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, or buying of Twitter, and he cut, I think, 80% or more of the employees and the contractors and so on. And what a gravy train that was. Fuck. And if you looked at the quality of the people at the apex of Twitter, I was always shaking my head in disbelief. That person is a senior exec in a 10,000 person strong. You got to be kidding me. That person couldn't even sweep the fucking floor. So when 8,000 people were got rid of, and the service in the company, if anything, improved, even though 80% of the employees were gone. Now, I don't know how this is going to play out in the long run, but the point that the number of points are being made is that most of the people who are hired in these programs, whether it be the Twitters, the federal bureaucracies, or the big multinationals that are guaranteed big, cozy, juicy government contracts, or the NGOs that feed off the USAID handouts and so on, the vast majority of people who've been given jobs there are the most unproductive members of our society, and they come from the group of minorities. Most will be women, most will be brown and black women. Now, if those people want to become productive, that's fine. But at the moment, they're being gifted jobs, and rather than being put through some sort of process of rigor and merit, they're being just gifted jobs that they otherwise wouldn't dream of getting in the real world. And all they've done is steal, I would argue, and loot the taxpayers' money to create this artificial veneer of productive employed workers, when in fact it's been quite the opposite. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.